Good morning, children. Yesterday, I have given you people an assignment, and the last point of assignment was to be discussed by me today. Well, the question was that a business was taking place within the state, that is, intrastate transactions were taking place, that we had to consider every transaction is taking place within the state. This was the first point. Second point was CGST and SGST percentage was applicable at the rate 6%. Now here the rest of the points you people already have understood, so I'll go on them quickly because many of you even have sent me the solution correctly. Now what is happening here is the first point says purchased goods for rupees 2 lakh on credit. Here when credit is mentioned and the name of purchaser, that means the name of the supplier is not mentioned, what we have to do is we have to credit the creditor, because I have discussed with you people earlier only that from whom we receive goods on credit is a creditor. So the journal entry coming here is since we have purchased goods, purchases got debited with 2 lakh. When we are purchasing goods, we have to pay GST. Since GST we have to pay will become an expenditure which has to be debited. So input CGST account got debited and input SGST account got debited. How this 12,000 came into the picture? So simply, as we have discussed that goods were costing to rupees 2 lakh and the rate of CGST and SGST is 6%. So 2 lakh ka 6% comes to 12,000 each. That is why this 12,000 is coming into the picture. The amount that has to be paid to the creditor is 2 lakh for goods and 12,000 for CGST, 12,000 for SGST. That means entirely we have to pay him 2,24,000, and that's why he got credited with 2,24,000. The next point that we had was sold goods for rupees 3 lakh on credit. Here also credit is mentioned, but the name of the person who purchased goods is not given. So nothing to worry about it. We'll consider it a debtor. And that is why debtor being receiver of goods got debited here. Amount we'll discuss a bit later. Sales being an income has to be credited. Since we have sold goods for 3 lakh, we have credited 3 lakh. Now, when we are selling goods, we definitely are collecting CGST and SGST from the debtor for government. Now, how much we are collecting? 18,000 each. And I guess you people have understood that 3 lakh ka 6% will be 18,000. And that is why 18,000 for CGST and 18,000 for SGST. Now the total amount will be 3,36,000. 3 lakh for sales, 18,000 for CGST and 18,000 for SGST. Okay, the next point that we have is we purchased computer for office for 50,000. Now when we have purchased computer for office for 50,000, that means it is an asset coming into the business. Since asset is coming into the business, it has to be debited. It has to be debited with the amount that it is for, that is for 15,000. At the same time, we also have paid GST on them, that is CGST and SGST, since the transaction is within this state. So input CGST got debited and input SGST also got debited. 50,000 ka 6% comes to 3,000 each. So 50,000 is for building, 50,000 is for computer, 3,000 is for CGST and 3,000 is for SGST. The total amount paid is 56,000. The next point that we have is legal consultation fee of rupees 10,000. Here we have paid a legal charges. Every organization do have some legal matters, and to solve them we have to appoint a legal person to whom we have to pay legal charges for the consultation fee. So we have paid legal fee, which is an expenditure, and hence it has to be debited. So legal fee got debited with the amount of rupees 10,000. As we already have discussed that these expenditure also lies in the category where we have to pay GST. So input CGST account debited with 600. Input SGST account got debited with 600, because 10,000 into 6% comes to 600, and the total amount paid will be 10,000 plus 600, that comes to 11,200. The next point that we have is rent of rupees 20,000 paid by check. Now since we have paid rent being an expenditure got debited, input CGST, input SGST got debited with 20,000 into 6%, and the total amount to be paid will be 20,000 plus 1,200, that is 22,400, and that is why bank got credited with 22,400. And now we have our last point, that is the adjustment. Now before we discuss about this adjustment, we should understand that why this adjustment and how this adjustment take place. So what happens basically, when we purchase goods, we have to pay GST, and when we sell goods, we collect GST for government. So basically what happens, when I was purchasing goods, I paid rupees 10 for GST, and when I sold the goods, I collected rupees 15 for GST. So just imagine that 10 rupees that I have paid for GST, is that technically that I am using for myself? No, since this is not an expenditure that I have incurred on utilizing some goods or services, and law says that you should pay tax on only on the goods and services that you have enjoyed using or gifting to your friends or relatives. Here we are neither enjoying it, consuming, using, nor we are gifting it. We are simply selling the goods. And when we are selling the goods and services, so we technically have not utilized those goods and services, and that is why we technically should not pay GST. So what if we have paid earlier? This is the adjustment. This is called the case of adjustment. What we have to do here is, we have to subtract that 10 rupees from 15, because 15 we have received, 10 we have paid. So what we have to do is, we'll subtract paid from the received. जो GST हमें रिसीव हुआ है उसमें से जो GST हमने पे किया है उसको सब्ट्रैक्ट कर दीजिए. जो डिफरेंस बचता है that will be the amount of GST that we have to pay to the government. So 15 received, 10 paid. 15 minus 10 comes to 5. So this is the 5 rupees that we have to pay to the government. This is the first point. Why am I mentioning GST, not CGST, not SGST, not IGST? Because they all have the same treatment. IGST has to be neutralized first. This case we will be discussing when we'll be getting question on this. Simply do remember that IGST has to be neutralized first, and IGST has to be neutralized with IGST first, later on with CGST and SGST. But when we talk about CGST and SGST, they cannot be utilized against one another. So CGST can be applied towards input CGST only, and output SGST can be applied towards input SGST. We'll go with an example. Here in the question, let's check that what is the amount of input GST and what is the amount of output GST in both the cases, CGST and SGST. So if you look towards the question, you'll see that in the first case we have input, in the second point we have output, in third we have input, in fourth we have input, fifth also we have input, sixth not to be taken into account because this is the adjustment part. Now what we have to see is that only in the second part we have output, in the rest all the cases we had only input. So if we talk about output, so output CGST and output SGST both are amounting to rupees 18,000 and 18,000. So let's see that output CGST and output SGST both will be 18,000. Now we have to check the input portions. So let's see here, in the first case input is 12,000 and in the second case 3,000. Let's check the working note. We'll have here is input CGST and input SGST. In the first point we had input CGST and input SGST both for 12,000. So 12,000 input here also, 12,000 input here also. In the second point, input CGST and input SGST both were 3,000. In the next point it was 600 and in the last point it was 1,200, as you can see here. So let's check that what is the total input that we have paid for CGST and SGST. So the total input will be 12,000 plus 3,000 plus 600 plus 1,200. 12 plus 3, 15, 16, 16,800. So 16,800 is the total amount of input CGST and input SGST. Now as we already have discussed that we have collected 18,000 from the output in both the cases, whereas to collect this output we had paid 16,800. Now what is happening here is, when I sold goods and I collected 18,000 for government, but when I was purchasing those goods I paid 16,800 to make this 18,000. So what will I do? I will simply deduct this 16,800 that I have paid for input from the output. That means 18,000 minus 16,800. That comes to 1,200. So 1,200 is the amount that I have to pay to the government for CGST, because 18,000 I have collected but I already have paid 16,800. So the balance amount that is to be paid to the government is only 1,200. Same as in the case of SGST also. I have collected 18,000 but I had already paid 16,800. So here also I'll pay to the government rupees 1,200. So here when I am paying 1,200 in case of SGST and 1,200 in case of CGST. So the total amount that I am paying to the government is 2400, and 2400 has to be paid to the government through bank. Now let's check our entry. And the entry is output CGST was having a credit balance because it was a liability, and now since we are adjusting that liability, it has to be debited. It has to be debited within 18,000. Same is the case, output SGST was having a liability balance, will also get debited because it is a liability that is being written off. So CGST and SGST both got debited with 18,000 and 18,000. Input CGST that earlier was debited because in expenditure. Now since we are collecting that expenditure, has to be credited. So input CGST and input SGST both got credited with 16,800. We already have seen in the calculation. So as we already have discussed, the total amount of 2400 will be paid to the government, and that is why bank got credited with 2400. And this is the case of set off of excess of output GST, or we can also say that this is the settlement of excess amount to be paid to the government. That is how the GST take place. So now I hope you people have understood. Tomorrow onwards we'll move towards the next point. By the time, stay home, stay safe, keep washing your hands. Thank you.